Halloween was always a big deal in my neighborhood. Decorations would go up weeks in advance, and on the night of Halloween, kids filled the streets dressed as everything from superheroes to monsters. It was festive, fun, and usually harmless, until last year. I live in a small, tight-knit town where everyone knows each other. On Halloween night, my friends and I decided to take our usual route around the neighborhood, knocking on doors for candy, as we did every year. We were all in our late teens, but Halloween had always been more of a tradition than an excuse for free sweets. This year, however, something felt different. There was an unease in the air that none of us could quite put our fingers on. Halfway through the night, we noticed a man in a mask following us. At first, we laughed it off, thinking it was just someone playing a prank. After all, it was Halloween, and people did weird things for laughs. The man wore an old, tattered clown mask, the kind that looked like it had seen one too many Halloweens. He stayed a few feet behind us, never getting too close, but also never falling too far behind. We tried to lose him by ducking into side streets, but no matter what we did, he was always there, lurking just out of reach. My friend Mike suggested we confront him, but I didn't want to escalate things. I thought the best course of action was to head home and lock the doors. When we finally reached my house, we all piled inside, slamming the door shut behind us. The man had disappeared. At least, we thought he had. After a few minutes of nervously laughing it off, we heard a loud knock on the door. Slowly, I peeked through the window, and there he was, standing on my front porch, staring straight at me through that grotesque mask. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, but found nothing. To this day, I still don't know who he was or what he wanted. But every Halloween, I can't shake the feeling that he's watching, waiting for the right moment to return. A few years ago, my friends and I decided to visit a pumpkin patch on Halloween. This wasn't your typical family-friendly patch, though. This one had a reputation. Locals whispered about it being haunted, and that the pumpkins grown there were cursed. It sounded like the perfect Halloween thrill. The patch was on the outskirts of town, down a long dirt road. When we arrived, the place had an eerie silence to it. No other visitors, no workers, just rows of pumpkins stretching as far as the eye could see. The sky was gray, and the air was thick with an uncomfortable stillness. We wandered the patch, picking out pumpkins to carve later that night. That's when we started to notice something strange. The pumpkins weren't just large, they were abnormally huge, with deep grooves and twisted shapes, almost like faces frozen in silent screams. One pumpkin in particular caught my eye. It was massive, larger than any pumpkin I'd ever seen, and its gnarled surface seemed to pulse as if it was alive. My friends dared me to touch it, so I did. The second my hand made contact, a wave of cold shot up my arm, and I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. I pulled my hand back, but it felt like something was gripping me, holding me in place. My heart raced as I yanked my hand free, stumbling backward. My friends laughed, thinking I was just acting scared for fun, but I knew something was wrong. We decided to leave, but as we walked back to the car, I looked over my shoulder and saw something move. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I saw it, a shadowy figure darting between the rows of pumpkins. It was fast, too fast to be human. My friend saw it too, and we bolted for the car. We didn't stop driving until we were back in town. I don't know what that figure was, but ever since that night, I've avoided pumpkin patches. Some things are better left alone. When I was a kid, my grandmother gave me a porcelain doll every year for Halloween. It was her tradition, and while I wasn't particularly fond of dolls, I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I accepted them. One year, she gave me a doll that was different from the others. It was old, with cracked white skin and deep-set eyes that seemed to follow me no matter where I went. I didn't like it, but I put it on the shelf with the others, hoping it would just blend in. That night, strange things began happening. I was lying in bed when I heard a soft tapping sound, like someone gently knocking on wood. I sat up and looked around, but nothing seemed out of place. I lay back down, telling myself it was just the wind or the house settling. The next morning, I found the doll sitting on my desk, Even though I distinctly remembered putting it on the shelf, I figured I must have moved it and forgotten, but it still felt off. The tapping continued every night after that, growing louder and more persistent. Eventually, it got so bad that I couldn't sleep. One night, I woke up to find the doll sitting on my chest, staring directly into my eyes. I screamed and threw it across the room. My parents rushed in, asking what was wrong, but when they turned on the light, the doll was back on the shelf, sitting perfectly still. They didn't believe me, chalking it up to nightmares. Desperate, I decided to get rid of the doll. I took it out to the trash, burying it deep under piles of garbage. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. But when I woke up the next morning, the doll was back, sitting on my desk as if it had never left. Terrified, I told my grandmother what had been happening. She got quiet and pale, and then she told me the truth. The doll had belonged to a little girl who died tragically many years ago. My grandmother had kept it, hoping to pass it down through the family, but now it seemed that the doll had other plans. I don't have that doll anymore. I don't know where it went, and I don't want to know. All I know is that it's out there, waiting for someone else to take it home.